We watch professional athletes in their respective arenas, maybe on TV, and we see them like real live superheroes, born with genetic gifts like Greek gods and goddesses. My first athletic achievement was that I killed a squirrel on an archery range at summer camp. I was 8 years old. To be clear, the squirrel was not the intended target. It wasn't that kind of camp. I went to summer camp, sleepaway camp, in the summer of 1978, and while swimming seemed to be something I took to naturally, I was somehow drawn to that archery range. I'd be out there from the time the bugle player played reveille until the time she played taps. All day, every day, I'd be flinging arrows haphazardly, hitting everything and anything except the actual target. This, of course, included the poor squirrel. At the conclusion of camp, there was an award ceremony where plaques and certificates were handed out for various achievements in rowboating, canoeing, tennis, swimming, arts and crafts, and of course, archery. There was no award for squirrel killer. I think my counselor saw something in me. Keep in mind, this is before the era of everyone gets a medal. Not in '78, they didn't. But I was called up before my fellow campers, and I was handed this flimsy piece of orange construction paper cut out in the letters PD. I was told it stood for persistence and determination. It didn't feel like an accolade at the time. I felt like kind of a loser. I was 8 years old, and I didn't feel like a superhero, not like the ones I'd seen on TV. I returned home from camp, I threw the PD in a drawer and tried to never think of it again, though that squirrel still haunts my dreams. Fast forward a decade, I seem to have found my place in a swimming pool. I was an aspiring athlete without a whole lot of natural athleticism, so the pool and the softness of water seemed like a safe place for this gangly kid. I set my sights high in my college selection process, boldly calling the Stanford University swim coach in the fall of my senior year of high school. I wasn't a known name in the swimming world, but he took my call as a courtesy. A friend of 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 one of my former coaches. He asked me my times in my various events, and I proudly told him. There was an awkward pause on the other end of the phone, and he said, "Well, Dede, you go to a real good school, and your grades seem strong, so if you get into school, let us know." Now I know how the squirrel felt. It was an arrow through my own heart. I wasn't good enough to be recruited by Stanford. But somehow, when the springtime came, I got an acceptance letter to Stanford University. I figured I'd lack the talent that my teammates would have. I knew I might not get to travel to meets. I might only get to train with the team. I knew I'd have to work incredibly hard, but that was okay. I wanted to try. I turned down schools that actually wanted me, and I headed out to Palo Alto in the fall, prepared to be a very small fish in a very large pond. Ironically, the coach had been right. I felt reasonably at home at Stanford academically, not a superstar by any means, but adequate. Athletically, I was getting clobbered. I'd never swum a double, and he had us swimming triples. I'd never lifted a weight, and he had us in the weight room 3 times a week. And on top of all of that exercise, there was something called dry land training, which for a swimmer means the horrible notion of exercising on land. Running, stadium stairs, abdominal exercises, pull-ups, upper body stretch cords. I'd been on campus for 3 weeks, and I was exhausted. How would I ever keep up? I wasn't a superhero. Not like the ones I'd seen on TV, and not like these women I had surrounded myself with. Would hard work be enough? It hadn't been on the archery range. In the pool, I'd miss intervals that were designated for warm-ups, and at one point, my coach looked down at me at the pool as I clung to the side, panting like a dog, and he said, "You know, Dede, you sure aren't the most talented athlete I've ever seen, but sure do work hard." A light went off in my addled brain. Instead of genetically gifted superheroes, what if we mere mortals were to realize that outstanding performance in sport or in life could come from having our own unique sort of superpower? If we could find something, anything that we're good at, for me, working hard, persevering, attacking each day with a dogged determination, maintaining a sense of humor in the face of constant failure. And if we could use that superpower to the best of our ability, day in and day out, can we overcome a lack of talent to compete with the best and brightest so that we may become like one of those genetically gifted superheroes we see on TV? I started to wonder if my camp counselors in 1978 had been right. Was persistence and determination my superpower? And what could I achieve if I relied just on that? Later on in my college career, we had a off-distance meet where you could swim events that weren't your primary focus. Someone had the great idea for me to swim the mile, typically a freestyle event, but I would swim it backstroke. When I finished, my coach came up to me and he said, "You know, Dede, if the mile backstroke had been an Olympic event, you might have been a pretty good swimmer." I endured 4 years of backhanded put-downs disguised as compliments, and I walked away from my Stanford swimming career a 2-time loser at 2 different Olympic trial events, 1988 and 1992. Persistence and determination hadn't made me an Olympian, just like it hadn't gotten me my archery award in 1978. But when I took a step back, I realized I'd achieved far more than I had ever dreamed, and far more than the Stanford coach gave me credit for at the onset. I went from, "Let us know if you get into school," to a 3-time NCAA champion, Pan American Games gold medalist, Pan Pacific Games gold medalist, Stanford team captain, and scholarship athlete. I'd traveled the world through swimming. I met Fidel Castro. On persistence and determination alone, I'd actually achieved a great deal. I went on to graduate school to get my MBA at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. A Wall Street job beckoned. I was studying for finals during my second year, and I was burnt out. So I turned on the TV, and the station was tuned into something called the Ironman. The Ironman, I learned, is a single-day, 140.6-mile race consisting of 2.4 miles of swimming, 112 miles of biking, and then running a marathon. Okay, that's bloody nuts. Let's tune in and see what happens next. I watched a woman by the name of Karen Smyers, one of today's speakers, come from a seemingly insurmountable deficit on the marathon to chase down the favorite in the race, a woman named Paula Newby-Fraser, who they called the Queen of Kona. And with 800 meters to go, in a 140.6-mile race, Karen caught her, ran past her to the finish line, a new world champion, a major upset. Paula collapsed to the ground and moaned, "I think I'm gonna die." I sat in my West Philadelphia apartment and grinned the grin of a Cheshire cat and said to myself, "Where do I sign up?" This looks like a sport where persistence and determination can take you far. I got into the sport of triathlon properly a few years later, and in an uncanny coincidence, I convinced Karen Smyers, that genetically gifted goddess superhero I'd seen on TV, to be my coach. I turned pro at an age where most are thinking about retirement from professional sport. And I've since won 3 Ironmans, 2 half Ironmans, been top 10 at the Ironman World Championship on 3 different occasions, twice being the top American. But I still get backhanded put-downs all the time, disguised as compliments. I was at the Ironman World Championship after party one year, and one of my fellow pros came up to me. She'd been well served, and in a bit of a drunken stupor, she said, "Dede, you're incredible. You're not really that good, but you always just kind of hang in there and find your way onto the podium." Had I not been equally served, I might have taken offense. But I was used to it by that point. I get it. People didn't think much of me athletically, but I knew I had a superpower, and it was taking me places. And then there was Frankfurt. In July of 2011, I made my way to Frankfurt, Germany to race the Ironman European Championship. The field would be stacked with some of the best competitors from around the world, but I felt equal to the task. Somewhere in the bike leg, I entered a roundabout. It had just started to rain. It was there I encountered wet cobblestone for the first time. Have you ever seen Bambi on ice skates? My wheels went right, I went left. I was lucky, they told me, because I was carrying so much speed when I crashed that I sort of skidded along the pavement like a pebble on a quiet lake. The more severe crashes, I'm told, happen at lower velocities. I took my first helicopter ride in Frankfurt, though I was unconscious at the time. All told, I broke 6 bones: my elbow, 2 ribs, my pelvis in 2 places, and my hip. They said I was lucky. I didn't feel very lucky. I made my way back home to the United States and was told by an orthopedic trauma specialist right here in Boston that it was over, that I'd never run again, never compete again. This time I thought the naysayers might be right. I doubted my superpower would get me out of this one. They have their limits, I suppose. But I figured I had to try to fight my way back, and by Labor Day, I went for my first jog. In October, I ran my first 5K road race, and by February the following year, I was back out on a race course racing a half Ironman. I had refused to listen to the naysayers. I was persistent, and I was determined, and I was back. In 2015, I won another Ironman, an Ironman 70.3. My Ironman win made me one of the fastest over 40 and one of the oldest to ever qualify for the Ironman World Championship. I'm now 51 years old and still competing professionally when many have told me I should quit. I've outlasted 2, 3, now 4 generations of professionals in my sport, and I'm not done yet. In 2016, I raced the 12-hour time trial world championship and set a new course record of 258 miles. I beat everyone, including all of the men. And in 2020, at the age of 49, I raced Ultraman Florida. Ultraman is a 3-day, 320-mile event. I set a new world record of 22 hours, 48 minutes, and 31 seconds, and beat all but one man in the competition. People ask me all the time how I do it, how at the age of 51 I compete against some of the best in my sport, many of whom are half my age. Surely there must be a magic bullet, some secret sauce, some fairy dust. I laugh at the notion, and sometimes it even makes me angry. Because I've known since the time I was 8 years old, I'm not special. I'm not genetically gifted. I'm not a superhero. Most of us aren't. The truth is, there is no magic bullet. There is no secret sauce. There is no fairy dust. The truth isn't fancy or sexy, or truth be told, even all that much fun. The truth requires persistence and determination. It requires showing up day in and day out. It requires showing up on days where you don't want to, especially on those days. So when people ask me how I do it, I know the answer. It's persistence and determination. It's my superpower. If you do the ordinary often enough, it becomes extraordinary. And guess what? This isn't unique to me. Anyone can do this. Persistence and determination. You've got to show up and fight like hell. I have a superpower. It was told to me from the time I was 8 years old. I am persistent and I am determined. And I'm not a world champion yet, but there's still time. Naysayers be damned. What's your superpower? And where will you let it take you? Thank you.